Okay, well, if this morning wasn't a good setup for this conversation, I don't know what was. So I'm glad you guys all stayed for lunch to continue this conversation. And if things go well, we'll have some time to mix it up a little bit with the room. But first, I think we should get to know Jim a little bit and his remarkable career, and maybe talk about kind of his reaction to these questions swirling around about the role of business and NGOs, and then maybe come talk a little bit more about what's ahead of us. But let me just do a shout out, if I might. I think this is being recorded, to my colleague Miguel Padro, who was the guy who really did the heavy lifting on the Aspen end of building this conference and is awaiting his second child right now at the hospital, we think, in New Jersey. So we're hoping all goes well on that end. And thanks to the team here for all the work that you've done to build this conversation. It's been a great partnership. So, Jim, congratulations on finally succeeding at retirement, kind of.
Sort of.
Sort of.
I like to use the word unemployed, but...
Unemployed. Well, if you're unemployed, I don't want to be your kind of unemployed when I'm ready for unemployment. 2 corporate boards, still Cigna and Applied Materials, on the board of Nature Conservancy, maybe even the officer role on that board.
Vice chairman. Vice
chairman of Nature Conservancy, which is a dynamic player in this world here, which we'll learn more about after lunch. So lots going on. A trustee of the Aspen Institute, I'm proud to say, and also of Brookings. So you're clearly going to stay in the mix here. But I think back over a career of 25 years in this industry, you couldn't have chosen a more complex, dynamic, important, but also, one ripe with all kinds of controversy to be in. And so I kind of wanted to start out and say, what's gotten you up out of bed these last 25 years? When, what have you enjoyed the most? You've built a company which is the largest utility in the United States. I'm sure there's other ways in which I could measure it as being the largest, but let's just start with that. 7 million customers, something to that effect. What drove you?
I think as the years went on, I think what got me up every morning is knowing that I was responsible for transforming the lives of millions of people when they got up every morning and threw the switch, turned on their coffee, turned on their lights, turned on their TV. And so my job was to make sure people had affordable, reliable, increasingly clean electricity 24/7. So that was motivating. The other thing that was really motivating, and maybe that's because I spent a decade in Washington, in and out of government, is the notion that in this role, even when we were a small company or a mid-sized company, and even more as a large company, we really had the ability to help shape energy and environmental policy for future generations. And so it's those 2 things, electricity every morning for everybody, right. And I think about how important that is today when I contrast it with the 1.2 billion people in the world that have no access to electricity and what their future is all about. And with also this ability to shape policy.
So you're on my favorite topic, policy, energy. Are we going to get there? Are we going to get the policy we need to be able to have the future that we're going to be comfortable with? I mean, and I will say one of the reasons I like working with business people is they tend to be optimists. So I'm going to grant you that. But what's your sense of where we are?
I think, and I'm going to come at this 2 ways. I'm going to first say the greatest technological innovation in the last 15 years in this country has been the development of shale gas. It's fundamentally transformed our CO2 footprint. We're back to 1992 level, even though the population of the country has grown dramatically. And even though the GDP is much larger today, and that was a classic case, and you could get into the details of it, but a private company working with government to come up with a technology to break a paradigm that exists in Washington today. The paradigm today is if you're going to produce cleaner energy, it's got to be more expensive. What shale gas did is prove you can produce cleaner energy at a lower price. The consequence of that is we're dispatching our gas units before our coal units, And that's one of the reasons our company and our industry and the country has really reduced its carbon footprint during this period of time. So technological innovation plays a role. Let me give you one other example. I had the good fortune to be one of the founding members of the United States Climate Action Partners, or called USCAP. This was a group that came together in
No, stop it right there. How many people signed on initially? So you were one of the founding members. There were only 10 companies that signed on in the first round. Isn't that right?
Right, like all things in life. In West Texas, they have a rule that the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land. So we knew we were pioneers by signing up to try to devise, and we brought together in this initial group NGOs like NRDC, EDF, WWF, ultimately TNC joined, but we also brought together major corporations like GE, DuPont, Dow, our company. So what you really brought together for the first time is you had a group of NGOs that are dominant policy players in Washington, a group of major corporations, and what our mission was, and ultimately 20 to 30 other people joined USCAP, but our mission was to put together a blueprint on how we could regulate carbon in the United States. Now, it was an incredible give and take. And I was in the meeting at that time running a company that was one of the largest consumers of coal in the United States with one of the largest carbon emissions. Actually, we were number 3 in the country. Trying to negotiate a way to regulate it and make the transition. And I would say that this blueprint got a lot of criticism from both the far left and the far right. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the House, Chairman Waxman took this, they marked it up, they were able to pass legislation. It hit a roadblock in the Senate, but the important point
like a brick wall in the Senate, right?
Well, actually it really boiled down to 17 moderate Democrats who are from states where over 50% of their electricity came from coal, and they were concerned about the impact on consumers. And actually, kind of one of the interesting things is, and just listening to the discussion so far, I haven't heard much mention of consumers, because at the end of the day, they pay the bill, not just for electricity, but for products and services. But what made this significant is that we were able to help the government solve the hard problems. You know, NRDC and our company could have lobbied against each other to get an outcome in Chairman Waxman's committee, but by coming together before in private conversations, we resolved the issues that we had and presented a solution that was a compromise, more or less, to the benefit of their objectives, our objectives, and made the job of Congress easier.
So I'd like to come back later, if we could, to kind of what's the grand bargain that would actually get us further down there. But let me go back to just kind of a fundamental question. Tell me about being a utility versus being a company of other kinds of companies. As I was thinking this morning about, I mean, this conference is about this gap, this kind of like this space that we're occupying here between NGOs and companies and government. In some respects, utilities are both government and private, but Duke is a major utility, the largest in the country, but it's also a public company. Talk to me about what's different about running a utility than, say, running applied materials.
I think the difference is the level of regulation. Virtually every company in this country is regulated by the SEC or other agencies in the country. Okay, so it's just a different level of regulation. And the regulation within the utility industry is even different. For instance, we have a hybrid system in the United States where a lot of utilities are vertically integrated and regulated by a state commission. They're regulated in terms of what their price can be and what they can build. So you have robust debates. And culturally, we have a history of having a lot of parties in our proceedings. And so we sort of developed the notion of collaboration. That's kind of part of our survival, because we like to reach settlements and present them to the regulators without the regulators having to make the hard choices. It gave us greater certainty about the future. And so one of the lessons in collaboration that I think is so kind of at the heart of our business is that there's a certain humility to know that you don't have all the answers. And even working with other stakeholders, they don't have all the answers either. And we need to come together to get the best set of answers that we can, which at the end of the day might not be the best answer, but it's a better way forward. The other thing I'll say, and I'll say this quickly, early in my career, mainly because I was a consumer advocate fighting rate increases, utilities, mainly because I was a federal regulator, I've kind of saw it from a lot of perspectives. And so I said, I'm going to run this business from a stakeholder perspective. At the end of the day, if I'm going to create value for my investors, I need to create value for the customers, create value for our employees, create value for the communities that we serve, and greater parts of society. But also, we need to be, because we have the greatest impact on the environment, we need to be a leader in addressing environmental issues going forward. And the environment becomes an important stakeholder to our business.
So this will lead us into this kind of relations between corporations and NGOs. But I just want to, are they, in your business, in your experience, are all of those stakeholders really equal? Or given that you're a utility, do you not have to pay more attention to government than, say, the rest of these guys?
I think because in the states where they regulate our rates and what we can build, where you have public hearings. I mean, think about this. In most businesses, you make a decision, I'm going to build XYZ. If we make a decision to build a gas plant, we go to a public hearing, and all the different parties, anybody can intervene, any group, and they can raise any issue. And so our goal line often is to work with the usual suspects that intervene in our case, the consumer advocates, the environmental groups, and try to kind of hammer in the customer groups. Industrial customers have their own kind of representative there, which have a different position than the consumer councils that represent primarily residential consumers. So we've tried to kind of accommodate the interest and reach some accommodation for all the parties, because at the end of the day, I know I'm going to be on the stand defending our proposal. Right. For instance, I want to build a gas plant, and they're saying, no, don't build a gas plant, build renewables. There might be somebody that says that, and somebody might say, well, you know, back when we were looking at building gas plants, we subsequently did, the price of gas was $10 to $12 an MMBTU. Back in 2007, nobody saw shale gas coming, as smart as we thought we were. And by the way, in 40 years in the energy sector, I've never seen a forecast of future prices that's ever been right. That's just a reality of forecasting. But I think the notion of bringing people together and listening, I mean, it's a gift to listen and then to craft a way forward that addresses their concern, but also allows you to achieve your objective. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness we got permission to build all those gas plants, because we've reduced significantly not only our costs, but our emissions of CO2 as a consequence of having built those plants and now burning gas in them.
So we could talk much more about consumers. I assume that what you mostly hear is cost from them, bring the cost down, not bring the emissions down.
Well, from a cost standpoint, consumers, when they stop and think about it, this is why it's so hard. We have this discussion at our table to change the behavior of customers in the use of electricity. Mm-hmm. It's only about 1.7% of their disposable income. They don't wake up in the morning saying, you know, I wonder where my electricity comes from. Actually, at a public hearing once, I had a woman say, why are you building this plant? Everybody knows electricity's in the wall. And I'm going, well, not quite. It is in the wall. But I think the notion is everybody's concerned with the price, okay? You hear that from the consumer groups, but you don't hear that from individual consumers because it's such a small part of their total budget. I will dare say, if I ask, I'm not going to try to embarrass anybody in the room today, but I've been in rooms of 400 or 500 people, and I say, raise your hand if you know what you pay per kilowatt hour. And there won't be maybe more than 3 or 4 hands go up. And then I'll say, how many of y'all know what you pay for a gallon of gas? Every hand goes up. And so it's a lack of awareness by consumers, and that's why you have professional consumer advocates fighting on their behalf.
So let's get a little bit into the relationship with NGOs. And maybe you could start with an example that you lived from the vantage point of being the CEO of Duke Energy. And then let's talk maybe about another one that, from your experience of being on the board of a nonprofit at this point, or, whichever one comes to mind. When did you see that process work well? This kind of clash of interest between the NGO, at the table, in some cases maybe using the brand or campaigns to get attention versus, the kind of Jason Clay, we're just coming to listen and we're all going to work this out. Or I don't know, what have you seen? What's the state of play today? Where are we? And what have you seen that works best?
I think that NGOs have evolved, corporations have evolved. If you go back to the 70s, we kind of go, no. And NGOs were more bomb throwers, okay? Some still are, but others recognize that we want real progress. And so engaging a corporation in addressing a problem becomes very important. And I see a lot more of that today. Let me give you an example from 10 years ago at the Nature Conservancy. This took place in Brazil, and Cargill was being attacked by Greenpeace because they were buying soybeans. And the question was, were the soybean farmers adhering to the country's code in terms of the fields that they were plowing in the Amazon? And again, it was an effort to protect the rainforest. And what Cargill did is go to work with the Nature Conservancy to say, how can we be assured that the soybean farmers we're buying from are consistent with the code in the country? So TNC developed a mapping capability, and this was kind of in the early days of, we didn't have Google then.
Right, handhelds, right.
And so they developed a mapping capability, and that mapping capability gave them the ability to know which farmers were in code, consistent with the code of Brazil. And that, the Greenpeace backed off of that because it was verified. It took Cargill and the scientists at the Nature Conservancy to come up with it. And what's interesting, and this kind of shows you why that kind of collaboration is important, is that President Lulu, and this is kind of one president back, basically made the decision to adopt this technology. And, I'm from the South, so English is my second language. I can't tell you exactly what this process is called in Portuguese, but I know the initial, C-A-R, car. But the fun thing is President Lulu took CAR and he used it and applied it to all the municipalities that operated in and around the Amazon to make sure they were in compliance and got the appropriate credits for dealing with the rainforest in Brazil. So it's a case of a corporation, and this is why I love the story, a corporation and an NGO solving a problem that ultimately is picked up by the government to allow them to monitor and get the right results from the cities in the country.
Right.
Which gets me to kind of another point, and I'm just going to lay it out there, and then we can come back to it. I'm at a place where I believe that NGOs and corporations and academia working together can make more progress in our country, particularly now when Washington is so dysfunctional. And so I think the real progress that will be made on tough environmental issues, that will be made on other issues, is when NGOs and companies and academia can come together and come up with a solution, not different than US CAP, because I think that's where real progress will be made, because we live in an era where, I need to say this carefully, whether both parties have moved, one to the far right, one further to the left. And so the moderates in Congress are gone. The people that compromise, people think compromise is a four-letter word, but they need to be brought solutions so that all the compromises are made and it makes it easier for them to make decisions.
So in your example of Cargill, you mentioned Greenpeace and you mentioned Nature Conservancy. Greenpeace obviously creates room for a Nature Conservancy to come in and be, the partner, right? By throwing the bomb, they create the space. This is obvious to all of us that observe this space. When do you say no? Like, if you're in your seat, when do you really say, no, we won't work with you?
I think my answer is always no for now. I think it's very important to always keep the doors open for resolution. Of maybe we can't, I have to say no for now, but tomorrow there may be another issue. Or maybe this issue will morph in a way that I can say yes. Or together, I might go home and come up with an idea and say, let's talk again. So I don't believe, I think the worst thing, I just believe this culturally. And if not, you got to maintain your relationships. You need to have a long view. And if you can't agree now, you can do it in a polite way, but keep the door open to work together on other issues or this issue if it morphs.
Was there a defining moment for you as the chief executive where you became more passionate? This is an area you have great passion about. How do we create an energy future that's sustainable? Was there a moment that was kind of a wake-up call for you?
Two moments. Actually, early in my career, I had the good fortune of being interviewed and selected to be CEO of a company called Public Service Indiana. I had just turned 41, okay? And the company was in trouble. They had written off a failed nuclear plant for $2.7 billion on the edge of bankruptcy. It suspended their dividend. And quite frankly, that's the only way a 40-something gets a job like that, when it's kind of a Hail Mary. To be honest about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But one of the problems is not only was morale low for the employees, but also they didn't have good relationships with the environmental community, as you might imagine, having to shut down that and write off $2.7 billion. And one of the things that I thought was important is to rebuild our relationships with the environmental community. And so one of the things that I did is I pulled together all the NGOs in the state. I pulled together the legislative leaders on environmental issues, and we sat in a room. I did it personally. I didn't delegate it. And we wrote an environmental code that we were going to follow as a company. We negotiated it among the parties, and then I took it to my board for them to approve it. And so that was an important moment because it's the first time I'd really, as a CEO, interacted. And then in 1990, with the Clean Air Act amendments, 97% of our electricity came from coal, huge emissions of SO2. But I made the decision that in the long run, we need to support cap and trade So we were the only company in the industry with a SO2 footprint as large as ours and supported the Clean Air Act amendments. From our industry opposed it. Now that made me a little bit of a maverick in the industry,
Right.
but it made it clear to me that this was going to be a way forward to clean it up and minimize the cost on consumers.
Right.
And that's a good answer.
Do we have mics ready? So I'm going to open it up, and if they're already ready, we'll go straight to questions now. And if it's still going to take a minute, let me throw one more. Yep, looks like we're ready. So, questions from comments from the room? Yes, I see a woman here, Sandra. There's a mic coming to you right now, and just introduce yourself.
I'm Sandra Martin from Martin Investment Management. We invest in public equities. And about, I want to say in 2007, we started a global sustainable stewardship strategy. We went around to a bunch of engineering schools. One of the issues that shocked me the most was our grid is about the same efficiency as when Thomas Edison built it. So what are the utilities doing? Because I know they're not rewarded for this, but what kind of collaboration is going on with government, with NGOs, with making our country more efficient?
Okay, it's a great question. We deliver electricity about 99.99% of the time. We have an analog grid where the engineers have built in lots of redundancy to maintain that level of delivery. We're in the process of transitioning to a digital grid. I mean, think about it. In the 21st century, I don't know when your lights are out until you call me. But with a digital grid, I'll have the capability to do that in the future, and I could be rolling a truck before you dial the number. And so it also leads to preventative maintenance, where I know a capacitor is going to go out, I can replace it. And so I think that we're in the process of doing it, but this costs tens of millions of dollars to do. It translates into higher rates for consumers. And in the states we've operated, we've actually had one state commission say, we don't want you to do this. We don't want you to improve the grid because it'll cost more. And we could make the business case, but an important part of the business case is the ability to deploy technologies to lead to productivity gains in the use of electricity within a home or business. And so that is kind of on the come, if you say, in a sense of the word. But I believe there are technologies today, I mean, line loss on our system, by the time you generate it and deliver it to the home, is about 7 to 9%, depending on the part of the distribution network you're in. There are technologies today that will reduce that to 2%, and we're piloting them, and that's going to happen, so that's going to reduce usage. The other thing is, take Ohio. Ohio has been very open to us building out the infrastructure to make our grid more efficient. So that's happening. And then the third thing is, I think you're going to see the evolution of microgrids in the United States around key facilities. Department of Defense is doing lots of work. Of course, money is no object to the Department of Defense when they make a decision. But we're looking at cost-effective ways to do a microgrid around a key critical facility. So when the system goes down, you've got the capability to keep a hospital running, a Department of Defense facility running in the future. So it is getting done. And the thing that's so transformative about our industry is the number of new technologies that are going to translate in productivity gains in generation, delivery, as well as use. This is going to be a new age. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that 130 years ago, when we started bringing universal access to America, we were the Facebook, the Google, the Microsoft of that era. We were high tech before there was high tech. And now we're in a place where we're going to have to deploy new technologies that take us to another level in the next 50 years.
Do you think, Jim, is energy really one sector, or is it many sectors? And let me take a little bit further what's behind the question, I guess, is that, so you mentioned that you were the first company to really, in the industry to step up and say we need a cap and trade system. It was an act of courage then. Maybe it was more sensible for your business. I wouldn't know how to analyze that. But obviously there have been other names in that industry that have been real laggards on this and have probably held us back in some way. At least that would be from the cheap seats, my impression of what's going on. It seems like cracks are starting to appear in this kind of mentality of, we're going to wait, the kind of lower common denominator trade association thinking. And we're starting to see some companies essentially say, I'm not going to be held back by those, there's going to be winners and losers. If I'm a winner here, it's time for me to step up and actually make sure that we're going to get where we need to go. What's your sense of that?
Two things.
Industry leadership.
Well, first of all, trade associations, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, Business Roundtable, or any other trade association, when you develop a policy in a trade organization, it's the lowest common denominator policy. So you're not going to see a lot of bravery come out of any industry association because, as you might imagine, you have those that say, hell no, we're not doing that. And you have another group saying we ought to embrace it and move forward. And so at the end of the day, you end up at a place that is kind of unremarkable. I think individual companies that see the future. I mean, let me give you an example.
Please.
I believe by 2050, virtually every power plant in this country will be retired and replaced except hydro. I know it's true with the nuclear, and the nuclear fleet in this country produces 70% of the carbon-free electricity. That's all going to be shut down by 2050 if they...
2050, you're saying?
50. But this is the most capital-intensive industry.
That's an incredible
long
statement.
Cycle business. But if you know that's going to happen...
Because they won't be able to get the approvals, or because in fact we'll have technology that will supersede it?
We've already expanded. When we got the original license for nuclear, it was 40 years. All our units, we've extended to 60 years. There are some within the nuclear industry that think you can extend it to 80 years. I'm not in that camp. So my belief is, particularly with the new nuclear technologies, I'd much rather shut down the fleet and build a new fleet. And small modular reactors are going to be probably commercial by 2025, 2030. And so the mix of small modular reactors with the large units are critical. In China today, there are 29 nuclear plants being built. The truth of the matter is, and I'm reluctant to say this as an American, but I believe that because of the work that they're doing, and we're only building 4 units in America, they will ultimately build the next generation of nuclear plants in the United States. They'll be able to do it faster and do it cheaper, and they will have the supply, the logistics and the supply line in place that we won't have.
Right. So
one reason to think about is two reasons to be a maverick today. One, you have a virtual clean sheet of paper in terms of designing generation fleet. The other reason is just spend time in Silicon Valley. Spend time with these startup companies. Wow, it's going to really change, and we need to change the regulation, we need to change the regulatory model, change the business model, where we're rewarded for optimizing the use of the grid, and also for encouraging productivity gains in the use of electricity.
Interesting. Other questions, comments from the room? Any other hands? Yes, John.
He said he had 2 moments that helped you come to the Green Deal. You only shared one, I think, so I just wanted to recall, get the second one.
Well, the first one was the process of writing the environmental charter. Okay. The second one, you got to remember, I'm a young CEO. I'm running a small company, not the largest company in the industry, of taking a position totally different than the remainder of the industry on the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. And I really thought hard because I said, I need to really think through. These guys have been CEOs for a long time in this industry, and they're all saying hell no to the Clean Air Act amendments. And I'm taking a position to say yes, primarily because I love the idea of regulators setting a target of emissions reduction and then turning to me and say, do it in a low-cost way, rather than command and control, build this, build that. And so at the end of the day, I was on the right side of history because it was passed, but actually the first George Bush, and signed into law. And as a consequence, we've reduced our emissions of SO2 about 90% at about a much lower cost because of cap and trade than if they had mandated the technologies to be used and to retrofit our existing plants. And so it was a lower cost way to do it, but why it was such a tough moment for me, I'm young, I'm running a small company, and I was taking a position, and I looked around the room and didn't see anybody else taking that position. And you always kind of wonder in a situation like that, oh my God, when you're alone on a position like that, you go, is this right or wrong for me to be doing this? At the end of the day, it worked out great.
Is there a quick answer to the question, what's the grand bargain here that's going to get us to a cap?
Do you know what I think? I'm a believer in technology and American ingenuity. And I believe in the same way shale gas has been so transformative, there is work going on, technologies being developed today. I think we're on the way to solving the problem. The truth of the matter is, where our company is, we will have shut down, we're in the process of shutting down, made the decision to shut down 90 coal plants because we brought these more efficient gas plants on. And we're in the wind and solar business, primarily selling to others around the country. And we see the costs really coming down.
Of solar and wind.
Yes, and so we've been slow to buy it for our customers. We're quick to sell it to others. But again, we want to do it in the smartest way.
Because it's more expensive than gas.
Yeah, I mean, that's where Germany kind of screwed up. Germany mandated solar and wind when the prices were up here, rather than feathering it in as the prices went down. As a consequence, their electric prices are 3 times higher than they were when they started. And they're about 2.5 times more than in the United States. So again, getting the balance right between affordability, reliability, and clean is critical, but there's a little bit of timing. So now, if I deploy solar in the areas that I serve, it's going to be at a much lower price today than it would have been 5 years ago.
All right, we're going to have to bring this to a close. I'm going to give
One
you
question right there.
Okay, you know what? I see 2 hands. Just quickly say what, or we'll only be able to take one. And then I have a softball just to close us off with. Yes, here.
I'm now worried when she tells me a softball, I need to duck.
Excuse me.
Thanks. I heard a theme this morning, which is that in order to deal with the bottom 10%, you need to have enforcement. I look at government and I see a paralyzed government and I see a rapidly evolving technologies. Doesn't matter what the industry is. Government doesn't have the alacrity to properly regulate in a rapidly evolving technological framework. How then do you establish the standard that's going to be enforced? Because you a moment ago said the trade associations won't do it because they're not going to set an appropriate standard given the politics of trade associations. So where do you get the standard?
I think
I
ultimately...
hope that wasn't a softball.
No, it's actually a hard question, because I think ultimately the standard for the bottom 10% is really going to have to come from the government. And it's going to take leadership from the top companies in the industry to embolden the government to set the standards, okay? And so it's, again, I think
Who would be top? Name it. I mean, what does that
what
mean?
industry? ExxonMobil in the oil business would be top. So, Devon, which is a natural gas company in Oklahoma, they'd probably be top in shale gas. And actually, there's a lot of states, and on the whole shale gas thing, they've really passed some good laws. Colorado, good shale gas law to capture methane that might be releasing from a wellhead. So there are, the reality is, the good regulation comes at the state level, you can't expect a federal solution of the smaller guys. You got to do it on the state level, because the city government, state government, federal government, the closer you get to the customer or to the consumer or the citizen, the closer you get, the more responsive the government is to solving a problem.
Interesting. The cities seem to have been the real innovators in recent years.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a softball. We're sitting in one of the great business schools on the planet here.
Okay.
Have you ever hired? Have you
Keep
ever?
going.
Have you ever? I said one of them, just for the record. Have you ever hired anyone, Jim?
From here?
No. Have you ever hired anyone? That was just kind of a lead in to my next question. You
Sure.
can say yes to that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I thought that was a trick question.
no. No, that was just.
I thought you were
You've hired a lot of people, right? So what are you looking for today? When you're hiring a lieutenant, let's say, what qualities in the kind of industry that you have excelled at leading, what's most important to you?
Maybe I should describe my special assistant that I hired and pulled in to work side by side with me. And this was a guy that went to competitive school, so I'll be careful how I say it because I'm mindful of where I am. But he went to Chapel Hill in North Carolina. Then he went in the Marine Corps for 5 years. And while he was at Chapel Hill, he started an NGO in Kibera, which is one of the largest slums in the world next door to Nairobi. And he ultimately wrote a book about that. But he had the energy to start this NGO, and he cut a deal with the Marine Corps to let him, that he would serve 5 years if they'd let him have a year off to really advance his NGO in Kibera. It's called Carolinas for the Kibera, is the NGO, if you want to send money. And then he comes back from 5 years in the Marines and goes to Harvard and gets an MBA from Harvard Business School and a master's degree from the Kennedy School. And this guy has got a worldview. He has incredible energy. He has incredible scope. When you think about all the things that he's done, and from my standpoint, we need to be taking more of the people that are coming back from the military and putting them in key places in our country because they've been leaders. And what you're looking for in a company is somebody that has a capability to have his self-motivated, drives the initiative. You turn him loose on a project. And I've actually given him a high-risk job of doing skunk works on buying companies that don't necessarily, you'd think, the traditional part of my organization would say, no, we can't buy that kind of business. But I give him the mission and the people to go explore, should we buy that company? A solar on the rooftop company, as a for instance, and incorporate it into our business because we're already in the renewable business. So that's kind of high risk in a corporation to have someone go off to, because there's always a battle over capital, to try to bring a new business in that would compete with the existing core business.
So it is a combination of the entrepreneurial, the analytical, and ability to get things done here.
Yeah, it's a get it done guy.
Let's all thank Jim for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.